So this is part 2. We're going to do some more theory. We're going to do some more exercises and things. This is not just useful for survivors, useful for anyone, but of particular import for work with survivors. So we're going to talk a little bit about values, and this is straight acceptance and commitment therapy stuff. I'm going to be teaching an intro to ACT here in April. Just a little plug there. So values are basically who are you and who do you want to be more of in the world. Survivors often have no idea. So doing some of this defining work can be really useful. And we're not talking about like, oh, I want to be rich or, oh, I want to be famous. But one of the ways that I'll start folks off with this is if I ask some people who care about you what some of your best qualities are, what would they say? And people hem and haw. Well, I guess they'd say, I'm kind, or I'm thoughtful, or I'm funny. This is just sort of like a beginning to help folks start to articulate who they are. And values are different from goals. Right? Like a value of being kind to people, there's never a destination we're going to reach. In ACT, they talk about it like going west. You know, you can always go more west. Once you get to California, you can keep going west. And once you get across to other continents, you can keep going west. There's no west you'll eventually get to. So with values, they're different from goals. Goals is I want to pass my exam. You know, I want to make $50,000 a year. Values are directions that we can move. And so it's good to help survivors start to define some values, which is also some self-definition, which can be fragmented. I don't know who I am. I don't know what my boundaries are. So getting an operating list can be great to launch pad some other stuff. I have here values bubble. We're probably not going to do this experiential exercise, but it's basically taking the safety bubble and transferring it to values. So if somebody's value is, say, creativity, and they're having trouble motivating or finding that creativity in their lives, I would sit with them like, okay, what is a time where you just felt really on? Your creativity was going nice and juicy. You're working with folks on art, whatever it was. And we'll revisit that. Okay, how does that feel in your body? Well, it's a tingle up and down my spine. All right, great. So we're going to breathe that full body out into the bubble, right? Because the way to be more of something in the world is to be more of it, to feel more of it. You know, if we feel that feeling of creativity, it's going to bubble out and it's going to more easily translate into our behaviors, rather than CBTing it and making smart goals and, you know, these kind of things. A little bit of a personal bias there. For me, it comes from the somatics. It comes from the experience. It comes from the inside and it bubbles out, okay? So you can do values bubble the same way you did safety bubble. Compassion often comes up in values discussions. Compassion is kind of a loaded word. Yes, we want to care about others. Yes, we want to be connected. Yes, we want to be invested in the long-term sustainability of the world. But sometimes the word compassion can mean to us, especially to survivors, that means I don't have any boundaries, and that means I let everybody else have more power than me, and kind of put myself at the feet of other people. So just a heads up to explore that word when it comes up. For me, like we did with the safety bubble, I can be compassionate, have an open heart, and really care about someone and still have that bubble up and live. You know, I'm not giving a piece of myself to someone else or letting someone else trample all over me. To me, that's not compassion. Okay? So, values play right into a metaphor called captain of the ship. This is my adaptation of an acceptance and commitment therapy metaphor that they call passengers on the bus, I think. Okay? So, captain of the ship goes like this. And this is really useful for this kind of like who am I question and what's happening, and I'm fighting my emotions. Okay? Goes like this. We are many selves. We're not just one self. Has anybody here ever been in conflict with yourself? Okay. So we're not just one self. All of these selves are together on a ship. Mine's a pirate ship. Yours could be whatever kind of ship you want. It could be a spaceship, could be a bus, could be a cruise liner, yacht, whatever you want. Okay? Every ship needs to have a captain on it. Okay? Even an anarchist ship, and mine is an anarchist pirate ship. Even an anarchist ship, it needs to be somebody's job to help coordinate everybody else to make sure we're all going in a valued direction. Doesn't mean that the captain is an authoritarian or has power over anybody else, but that's somebody's job. Without the captain, where's that ship going? Okay? Our feelings show us some of the parts, some of the people on our ship. Okay? I've got a guy up in the crow's nest of my pirate ship who scans the horizon for danger. Super useful. If he's running around the deck of the ship screaming like his hair's on fire that we're all going to die, not useful. So it's my job as the captain to learn how to relate to that guy, help him calm down, and help him perform a useful role on the ship. I've got another guy whose job it is to fire the cannons, because sometimes I get into arguments. Useful. Sometimes we got to defend ourselves. If this guy's going hog wild and launching cannons at every approaching ship, I'm not going to have very many relationships. So it's up to me as the captain to relate to this war guy and just keep him calm, and he can polish some cannons in his off-duty time. There's another guy on the ship who walks around and is like, those ropes need to be coiled, the deck needs to be swabbed. Come on, guys, we can't sleep in today. Useful part. When that part is using whips on people, telling them that they're worthless, they don't deserve love, that they're terrible, that inner critic, right? Not useful. So it's the captain's job to work with that part. So I'll try not to belabor the point. Those are some examples. In my experience, we can't make any parts of ourselves walk the plank. We just can't. So even what seems to the client to be the most horrible, worst part of themselves that they avoid, repress, shove down, that part has a valuable role on the ship. And part of our work is to explore what that is. Okay? So with captain of the ship, our captain directly corresponds to values. Who are we when we're being who we want to be? How can we be more of that? How can we be that person when we relate to these other parts of ourselves? Okay? So I'll try to come up with a clinical example. I've introduced captain of the ship. We're doing pendulation with this old, deep, lonely sorrow in the client's belly. So intense. They're able to be with it. You know, we've practiced enough. We're doing pendulation, managing the feeling, then we're connecting with it. I see you. I'm here with you. And the client's like, okay, I'm here. I'm in a relationship with you. You know, like, what is this feeling saying to you? It says, I'm hurt and I'm lonely. So then some of the next questions are, you know, what do you think might be this part of you? What does it want? What value is hidden there under the pain? And the client might realize it's the part of me that really loves to connect with other people. It's a part of me that's really connective and really relational and really sensitive. This is the part of me that's been so wounded I haven't wanted to look at, and so I stay locked up in my apartment by myself. But within that hurt and within that loneliness is the sensitivity and the connection that is a value that up until now has been repressed and stuffed down in an attempt to avoid the pain. So the client, willing to act as the captain and to connect with this hurt, literally being experienced in the body, is able to connect with a part of themselves underneath that hurt and that pain and bring that value more into their lives of connection. Yeah, you can use this really soon. It's a great framework to operate from, right? Because it helps people orient, like, oh, these overwhelming experiences I have are parts of me that need my help. Awesome, great, So as an overlaying framework, it's excellent. You can even start with it in the first session. As far as doing group work with it, sure, there's a lot of potential for like different people to play out some of the different parts, do some like group role play acting, that kind of stuff. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, as a framework, we're starting to get into the cognitive stuff, and this is really great for clients who are super cognitive as well. Yeah.
So this is kind of a little bit off track, but this exercise makes me think that it might be helpful with folks who have DID to kind of orient themselves to their parts, which is kind of how you would describe the personalities.
Yeah.
And find a way to see them as protective factors that are part of the coping mechanism that they've used, and then to say like, well, how can I change that and use it to my advantage going forward?
Totally. Yeah, really great with DID clients. Works really well with internal family systems, other theories that operate from this perspective. And as Linda Harrison, my former supervisor, would say, DID is extreme trauma. That's what it is, and it's the fragmentation of the self, which we all experience to a degree. All of us have experienced being in conflict with ourselves. It's different members of our ship trying to take over, and we're not sure, which one to go with or how to find that compromise. So really a lot of this work, in my experience, and that's where I draw both from ACT and from compassion-focused therapy, is that compassionate relationship with all these parts of ourselves, like integrating into a whole.
Do people have difficulty sometimes like identifying who or where the captain is and just like conceptualizing that, and how you help them conceptualize and kind of tease out the part of themselves that's sort of the orchestrator and the, you know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah, that's specifically the values work. Is like, what are these qualities? What are your best qualities? What do people really love and care about you? What is it that you want to be? Even if it's just one or two things, then that starts the captain work. And then also that the reflective pieces that we do, if we're doing person-centered stuff, what we value about the client, and, appreciate being here with you. I've noticed that you're just really communicative and really clear. I understand what you're communicating. That can help build the values work also. Thanks.
One of the things that struck me when you were talking about this, and it just immediately came to my mind, especially when you were talking about the guy in the crow's nest, was, and I don't know if you've ever done this, but I wonder if it would be workable, as a group therapy or individual thing, and to use some art in therapy and have them create their ship.
Ooh.
And if they did, then where would each of the people be located?
Yeah.
Or what kinds of things would they be doing while somebody else is in the crow's nest and that sort of stuff?
Love it. Yeah, I love this. Thank you. Yeah. Sometimes we talk about, somebody being down in the hold of the ship, all in the dark, or somebody being in the brig, which is like the jail on the ship. But doing an art exercise would be great. I run groups for male-identified survivors of sexual trauma, and we do a boundaries art exercise where they draw what their boundaries look like, but I'm loving this. Thank you for the suggestion.
Well, I'm a very visual person, and so the very first thing that struck me when you said crow's nest was I could visualize you in the crow's nest, and then I'm thinking, well, where would I be? And I don't know, because I don't even know what kind of ship I'm.
Yeah. Sounds like you got some art to make. Great. Thank you so much.
That would be a good group project.
Yeah. Totally. Be a great group project. Okay. Any further thoughts or questions about values or captain of the ship?
I think like a lot of my adolescents kind of struggle with, well, I don't want to have this anxiety. Why do I have to live with this anxiety?
Yeah.
So I think kind of helping them like normalize that and get that, you know, a member of their ship and it serves a purpose. You're detail oriented. That's going to serve you in positive ways, and you know, and all that overthinking to kind of give it some purpose and usefulness.
Awesome. Yeah, totally makes these parts of ourselves useful. They have a role. They're not just trying to attack me and make me crazy. They're trying to help me. As messed up as it is, how they're trying to help me. Like that self-critic, right? That inner critic who just tells us that we're worth nothing. It's trying to help us in a really awful way. Really awful way. It's picked up maybe how we were treated by our parents or caregivers or something like that. But it wants us to do well. It tries to keep us from getting hurt by hurting us. You know? So it's a matter of coming into a different kind of relationship with that part of ourselves that has a purpose. Absolutely. Thanks. Okay. Cognitive exercises. So, when we practiced space between breaths, I think some folks commented, and some of you may have noticed, kind of that constant flow of thoughts that just goes and goes and goes and goes. I don't know how many of y'all have practiced meditation, and one of the first things you notice is like, oh my goodness, does my mind go? So I like to call this the hamster wheel and orient clients to this because it can be a little intimidating or overwhelming when they start to practice mindfulness. And then they're like, oh shit, there is so much in there. I don't know how I'm ever going to get through this. So one of the things we do to concretize it is it's the hamster wheel. There goes the hamster wheel. So here are a few different cognitive techniques that come straight from ACT that we're going to practice, okay? And this is for thoughts that are just really intrusive, really intense, and folks are, as they would say in ACT, so fused with them, it's hard to get any space for them, okay? So self-critical thoughts. So first, this is going to require, if you're willing, just coming up with something that you might say to yourself or a thought that might bother you, that you struggle with yourself, or maybe something that you hear in the room a lot if you'd rather work with something that a client has brought in or lots of clients bring in. So what's a phrase or a sentence you might say to yourself that has some impact, or you're like, Okay. So first we'll practice up on a wall, all right? So I want to invite you to think that thought to yourself. Notice what it's like to hear that thought in your mind. Now, let's see. Up on a wall, let's say maybe up here above the PowerPoint, I want to invite you to see that thought in letters, like it's a banner. Notice what color the letters are, what the font is, how big. Maybe it even drips onto the wall there. Okay? And maybe even there's another thought that goes automatically right after it. All right? Now wipe it away. And then think the thought again in your mind. Okay, and then one more time, put it up on the wall, maybe in a different font this time, different color. Now, what do you notice between in your mind and up on the wall? What do you notice?
Doesn't feel as powerful.
Doesn't feel as powerful.
It doesn't seem as personal as well.
Yep. It's more impersonal. It's just kind of there, like an advertisement or something. Yep. That's pretty much it. So what we're practicing is called diffusion, right? Rather than the thought seeming so real right here in our minds, we put it up on the wall, and it's like, it's kind of a funny thought. Who wrote it in that script? Okay. You can also do this when clients are like replaying traumatic scenes or like shameful scenes or something that they wish hadn't happened. Somebody's going through a breakup or something like that. You can have them put it up on the wall in a TV screen. Okay? You can reduce the size of the TV screen. You can offer them to change the channel with their imaginary remote. And it might change back to that scene. We're not trying to thought stop. ACT says we can't get rid of thoughts, right? We can't get rid of thoughts. But we can negotiate our relationship with them and how we hold them. Okay? So TV screen, turn it off, change the channel. Maybe it comes back. But also it's a big difference for clients to be up on the wall in that TV screen than it is to be in their mind. Okay? Our minds treat our internal experiences as if they are real. Okay? So I invite you to try something. Imagine you're holding a lemon wedge between these two fingers. Okay? I want to invite you to hold your fingers like this. Give it a little squeeze. Feel that plumpness. See that bright yellow color. See the light kind of glistening off its juiciness. Maybe squeeze it and give a little smell of that citrus spray. I don't know about you, but my mouth is starting to water. And then open your mouth and take a bite. Feel that lemon juice spray all in your mouth and that kind of acidic reaction. Right? You're having a reaction, right? Our minds treat internal experiences as if they are real. Okay? And so survivors are replaying abuse, replaying shameful events. All this stuff is happening. All these terribly uncomfortable experiences they're having internally, and their mind is treating it as if it is real. Okay? This is why diffusion is so important. Any questions about this so far? Okay. How we doing? A little less than an hour left. Great. Okay. So now we're going to try and experience an exercise called downward arrow. Okay? I think this one's straight CBT. So this requires that self-critical thought. Okay? So we're going to go back to that. And then I want to invite you to start a dialogue. Okay? And you're going to ask your mind, okay, then what's going to happen? Or what's the result? And your mind is probably going to tell you something terrible, okay? Then you ask it again, okay, then what happens? Okay, then what happens? Okay? So I'm going to give you a minute or two just to take that thought and just start asking, then what happens? Then what happens? And just follow it. And we'll check in 2 minutes. Okay, and I'm sorry if I'm interrupting anybody's wonderful fairy tale that their mind is telling them, but I'm going to take some guesses. Anybody kind of reach an end point? Okay, so I'm going to take some guesses. One is you ended at, you're going to die, or you're going to suffer alone and no one's going to love you. Or it just kept circling around. The same stuff. Does that reflect some of y'all's experience of where you got to? Anybody have a different experience of where it went?
Yeah, mine, it, like the first, and then what happens was like really, in my head, it's been this anxious thing that I've been worrying about all week. And then I did that, and like the actual, and then what happens was not that big of a deal, and it stopped. I was like,
Yep.
it was easy.
Awesome. That's the other.
Rare. That's rare.
That's the other report, though. You're not the first person to report that that's what happens. It's like once it's actually thought, it's like, oh, actually things were going to be okay. They're going to be kind of cool. Mm-hmm. Anybody have a different experience? Okay. So downward arrow is useful to see, number one, kind of what is at the bottom of this self-critical process. And it's, you're going to die, nobody's going to love you. So there is a bottom, unless it just goes around and around and around, in which case we demonstrate that's the hamster wheel, So it frames it out. The other is, gee, that voice is actually kind of ridiculous. Mm-hmm. I can remember the first time I discovered this, like riding my bike, and it was like the further I went and the deeper I went and the deeper I went into the process, it was like this voice in my head's throwing a tantrum on the ground, screaming and crying, and I was going to die. I was like, really? You're silly. You're so silly. Which leads us right into silly voice, okay? This is my favorite, okay? So come back to that self-critical thought, okay? And either in your out loud voice or your inside voice, say that thing in a really silly, weird voice. Okay? Bonus points if you do it out loud.
If we go to 3 and we all do it at the same time.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, do it in your minds. Do it in your minds. Okay. And you can try all kinds of voices. I have some clients that make little puppets of their hands. And what you realize is just how silly some of these thoughts are when you say it in a silly voice. And clients love this exercise. Love it. Because this thought, just like the lemon wedge, that they're so identified with and seems so real, and they talk about it in a silly voice. It's just not so believable. Very occasionally, I've had a client who, when we try silly voice, they start crying and melt down a little bit because they feel like they're mocking themselves. So that is something to watch out for. We are not trying to hurt or mock parts of you. All we're trying to do is just get a little distance from this thing that's really been hurting you. So then there's an opportunity to connect with their value of compassion and care for their different parts of themselves, and draw that into contrast to this really self-critical thing that they're not ready to say in a silly voice. Okay?
Any suggestions on how you present these to clients, to create the space for them to do them in a session?
Yeah, pretty much like I just did here. Rather than building it up and the reasons why and diffusion, it's I find it effective because you'll hear them say the thing in session, right? But nobody really likes me anyway. And I'll say, oh, that thought right there that your mind just gave you, how familiar is that thought? Oh yeah, I say that to myself all the time. Let's try a little experiment. And just introduce it right there. It does take some therapeutic trust and relationship for the client to be trying this silly voice stuff. Usually they'll do it in their mind and not out loud. but usually also will end up cracking up in session. Get the boys into so silly. That's so silly. All right. Any other questions, thoughts, reflections on silly voice or any of these other cognitive exercises that we've practiced? All righty. Here we go. Moving to the home stretch. So, here are some ways that you can respond to a disclosure. All right? Where someone says, I was sexually abused, or this weird thing happened to me. Okay? One of the most important things you can say is, I believe you. It's one of the primary fears of survivors, that they're finally going to summon up the courage to tell somebody, and they're not going to be believed, or they're going to be dismissed. Okay? I know y'all are therapists. I do this workshop also for survivors, for allies. So I know some of this stuff is probably obvious to a lot of y'all. But just basic empathizing, validation, okay? Super important. This wasn't your fault. A lot of survivors struggle with this, okay? And it can be our tendency as clinicians to want to beat them over the head with, it wasn't your fault. Don't get into a fault battle, okay? I want to encourage y'all to kind of hold this as a basic position, but also sometimes clients need to explore that for themselves. They need to explore, what was my responsibility, if any, in this situation? And it's important for us, to hold this basic structure of, actually, I don't think any of it was your fault. But allow them the room to go through this process of exploration. Okay, that's an important piece too, because they need to find their voice. They need to find what they think about it. So support folks in it. It makes sense that you feel this way. All this nervous system stuff that we've been talking about, the neurophysiology of trauma, is so useful for clients to frame out their experiences. As survivors, we feel fragmented. We feel overwhelmed. None of this makes sense. So for the neurophysiology, for captain of the ship, for a lot of these pieces to provide that framework is so grounding and so useful. And there's our graphic for people who want to know how to make an empathy face. That's what you do. Yep. Eyebrows in, head forward a little bit, lips together. Okay. Here are some common questions and beliefs. Okay. Why did I keep going back? Why did I keep going to my coach's house even though I knew what was going to happen? Because he groomed you. Attachment manipulation is a fancy clinical way of saying grooming, right? Perpetrators are really good at finding out when kids don't have healthy attachments, don't have those good family connections around them, and they'll manipulate kids, okay? Or you were afraid. You were afraid of what he would do or not do. You were afraid he'd kick you off the team. You were afraid he would tell the team what he was doing and make it seem like it was your fault. Why didn't I fight back or say no? You were scared. I get scared. I've been mugged and punched in the face, and all I could do was just stand there. I couldn't even move.
So about the attachment manipulation and the grooming, especially in cases where maybe it might be family members or close to immediate family, not necessarily I'm sure it's possible that the perpetrator is not necessarily consciously grooming, but it's a relational pattern. I mean, it's still, that's what happened, but I'm just wondering versus, you know, like you had a slide about free candy, like instead of the luring grooming, that it's just, because I see a lot, especially with like the Medicaid type of population, where it's almost like an incestual pattern within the family. So the family member and the person can't really even identify it as manipulation. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It may not seem like intentional manipulation, but there are no accidental perpetrators. Right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. And so no matter how woven into the fabric of the family, the grooming and that kind of stuff is, you know, if the client is like, I don't know why I stayed in the family, or I don't know, you know, why or what was happening, it's like, right.
Because
Yeah, it seemed normal.
Continues on, like there's no, even in identifying the trauma, there's no separation of that dynamic.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if ritualized is a good descriptor for that.
Ritualized?
Ooh.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's part of the fabric of how the family operates. It's systemic.
This is what we do.
Right.
Mentality.
Yeah. Stephen?
Well, I think another layer that maybe is important to add is that when it's the primary attachment figure, when we're not talking about a coach or a teacher, and the keep going back, is that the child's need for love and connection and survival is more important than this other thing that's happening, right? So that those wires are crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the worst kind of attachment manipulation, as in food, shelter, clothes, love.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. It gets real confusing for folks. Real
Because
confusing.
I work even with people that have cases with DHHS, custody, and it's all family intertwined.
So it's their world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, you know,
Totally.
it's an ancestral relationship and generational. So it's really hard to kind of tease that out when that's their family culture.
Yeah. Yeah. To explain why it's wrong.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. That's
Yeah.
hard.
Bless you in that work. Yeah. I mean, folks who come to see me, they're already like, I think that wasn't okay. Or they're like, yeah, that was not okay. But as far as having to convince a family system not to molest each other. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Especially in smaller rural communities.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So why didn't I say anything? Most survivors don't. So you can normalize that right there. You know, you were afraid, maybe threatened. You didn't know what would happen. You know, as bad as a sexual abuse might have been, at least it was a known factor, right? I have someone who hid it from the rest of her family for 12 years, something like that, as it went on for 12 years. Yeah. Why didn't they believe me when I told? So this is a good example of a time to talk about rape culture, okay? We're going to go back a little bit into the medium end of the pool, the medium side of the pool. We're not going to hit the deep end, but rape culture, if you're not familiar with the term, this is what the Me Too movement is fighting, okay? Rape culture says, what were you wearing? Rape culture says, how much were you drinking? Rape culture says, I just grab them by the P word and they do whatever I want, okay? Rape culture is locker room talk. Rape culture is this whole system that's sort of set up to denigrate survivors, to disbelieve their stories, and thankfully is something that's starting to shift on a national level with Title IX stuff in colleges, with the Me Too movement, with Weinstein being taken down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's shifting. Man, I wish I had the graphic. If you Google rape culture, it'll show you this pyramid that has all these different levels. At the top is just straight up sexual violence. At the bottom is stuff like locker room talk, covert condom removal, stuff like that. And it shows how it all sort of works together to create this whole culture, okay? It's my fault. Very, very few clients do I have, if anyone, who's very clear that what happened was not their fault in any way, shape, or form. So like I was saying, try not to get into battles with folks about it. They need to figure it out. But sometimes when I need to sort of apply the therapeutic hammer in a moment where it is therapeutically appropriate, I will ask them, did you want to be raped? No. No. So for me, that's sort of a bottom line around the fault piece, you know? We can work out a narrative around I was drinking or whatever. We can talk about that. But did you want that person to have sex with you while it was happening? No. Okay? Bottom line. Sometimes folks say, I'll never heal from this. I don't know what this looks like. I just keep doing the work and keep doing the work, and there's always more work, and I don't see any end to it. I don't know if there's an end to it. I don't know. I don't know if we're ever going to get to a place that's called West. But in my experience, our wounds do become scars. We do the work, we heal, we apply the topical ointment, we take care of ourselves, and scars are kind of cool, I think. I think they're beautiful. So in my experience, you know, I can talk to folks. This is how I see folks progress. This is kind of what healing looks like. Here's some resources. But this is a big one. I'll never heal from this. Good time to review progress, accomplishments in therapy. Did someone have something?
Back to rape culture just for a second.
Yeah.
It made me think of something from 100 years ago when I was coming along. There was a wonderful book by Ann Wilson Schaaf called When Society Becomes an Addict. And it is, and I see you nodding your head because you know exactly what I'm going to say. You're the one who made me think of it, actually. And it deals with cultural when you are completely lost the word. When culture becomes so ingrained in you, like discrimination of against blacks or discrimination against women, and or any other thing that it's a huge cultural discrimination kind of thing, where you live with it every day and most of the day, one way or another, and how you get to the point where you don't even recognize what it is and it's staring you in the face.
Yeah.
And even though this deals mostly with women's issues, it still would be appropriate in almost any situation for a culture that's like a rape culture or anything else.
Sure.
So I really highly recommend that book.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, it's like swimming in rape culture fishbowl. You know, just breathe in the water. Yeah, and there are myths that male-identified folks really struggle with too. You know, men aren't supposed to be raped or abused. You know, it makes us lesser. If we are, then we're going to become perpetrators. You know, there's all kinds of stuff and ways that rape culture affects guys as well.
Including the testosterone business of if you don't fall into the category of somebody who talks locker talk and that sort of thing, then you must be a queer, you know, or there's something wrong with you if you don't. So that in itself is the kind of culture that we're talking about.
Yeah, and it is changing. You know, I want to share in confidence, and I'll share generally, the last male survivors group that I did, we talked about shame, one group, and then they loved it so much they wanted to talk about it again at the next session and specifically talk about how they felt as male-identified survivors and what the messages are that society gives them. So we started with, what is masculinity? And they were like, I don't know. Right? This is a group ranging from like a 15-year-old bisexual high school kid with purple hair to like a 65-year-old black veteran. Huge range. in the group, and they talked about it, and they were like, they realized masculinity is something that is held against them, used against them. It's something that they can never live up to, no matter how hard they tried, and that masculinity is basically bullshit.
Yeah, that's it.
I was floored. I thought it was amazing. And so I asked them, what qualities do you value about yourself when you feel like a man? What do you feel? And they were like compassionate, connected, engaged. And I was like, interesting. And those don't fit a binary of masculine or feminine. It was so great. So great. And they arrived there by themselves. So I do have hope. I do have hope for our culture.
And for
Yeah.
support of men, I've discovered the Mankind Project. And so that's a very empowering organization for men that I love to give a lot of press to.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't get really enough promotion.
For some, if you want to talk more, I'm aware of some other wounding and some not so great experiences folks have had there too. But let's talk more about that. Yeah. Cool. Any more thoughts, questions, reflections on these questions or beliefs?
I just think it's interesting with the "it's my fault" piece. That would be great in terms of the captain of the ship, because it is serving a purpose, because somebody goes, okay, if this was my fault, then I can do something that will make it sure it doesn't happen again. I have control.
Control.
So
Interesting.
So being able to look at the why somebody goes through that process of hoping that maybe they can control their circumstances.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I've got a client who's really struggling. They are clear that 2 really earlier experiences are not their fault, but then some recent experiences are really struggling with it, and they're very control-oriented. So thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So over the whole thing, any questions arising? Any concerns about anything that we've learned here today or talked about? Any feedback you want to offer before we get into resource list and just a couple follow-up pieces?
I'm just curious, the trans population, it's much, much higher to have experienced sexual assault, but what about folks that identify as gay or lesbian?
I don't have any specific stats there, but my impression is that it is as high or higher than hetero folks. And I will try to add that to my presentation. Thanks for asking. Any other questions, concerns, feedback?
You might have said this because I missed the first little part of the presentation today. Is this a slideshow you're willing to share just for information?
I am, yeah, and I didn't say that. Yeah, so generally I don't print out the whole thing because it's kind of a waste of paper. But my cards, I actually remembered to bring them for the first time, are over there. There are some evaluation sheets that I'll ask y'all to fill out in a few minutes. But yeah, if you email me, I can share the slideshow with you. No problem. Yeah, thanks. Anything else? Anybody sitting with? Anything left out? Anything making you go, I don't know about that? Okay, moving on. If you don't know about Our Voice, you should, and you do now. I'm a contract counselor with them, but I still like to say we when I talk about Our Voice because I love them. So we offer free counseling, up to 16 free sessions for survivors and for their loved ones and allies also. So for partners, family, folks who are struggling with what happened or how to support the survivor. We offer groups. I'm about to start another male survivors group. And in the summer, we're going to have our first trans non-binary survivors group with Stephen. So excited. Yep. That'll be July, August. They're female identified groups. There's also a new group coming up for folks who feel kind of wounded by their spiritual or religious culture growing up. So as long as they are a survivor and have some form of, I was a Jehovah's Witness, or, my Christian faith was damaged or something, the abuse does not have to overlap with the religious culture, but just those two experiences. That group's starting soon also. Stoked about that. We do court advocacy. We go with folks who want to press charges, go with them to court, support them there. We do hospital visits. We have advocates who do a 2-week training, and then the hospital calls because someone's been sexually assaulted, and they go to the hospital to be with that person to help them through the process. The advocates also monitor a 24-hour crisis line where folks call, they're in crisis, they need an ear or they need help because of some form of sexual trauma. We do bar outreach. So we go to bars and train them how to watch out for people putting drugs in drinks, stuff like that, signs of impending assault. Code Red is a college campus program promoting awareness on UNCA, etc. We have prevention, education, and outreach. So we go into the schools and teach about consent. I think we're finally in the elementary schools now. It was a struggle. First it was just high schools and then middle schools, and now we've gotten into elementary schools too. We have a human trafficking department as well, because that is really prevalent in our area, y'all. It is really prevalent. There's the business line. There's the crisis line. I think I have the website on the next page. But yeah, Our Voice. Keep it in your back pocket.
And does Our Voice do like a sex workers program also?
Yep, yeah, Sex Workers Project. Yep.
What's the age that the Child Mountain Advocacy Center stops and they start?
Thank you. Yeah, we do 13 and up, and Mountain Child Advocacy Center does, I think, up to 17 or 18. So we have some overlap, I think. But we serve ages 13 and up. Yep. And they do TFCBT also. Whereas the counselors at Our Voice were largely person-centered, trauma-informed, and then most of us do EMDR as well. Yep. So here's a list of resources and websites. I'll say a little bit about these. RAIN.org can connect people with crisis centers all over the country. Pandies is a forum for folks to connect with other survivors, other loved ones, lots of support and resources. Forge Forward has great information for trans survivors. That's where that group manual came, right, Stephen? Yeah. 1in6.org is geared specifically for male-identified survivors, as well as malesurvivor.org. Malesurvivor.org also has a forum that's very well moderated, so guys can get on, they can talk about what happened, they can talk about football, movies, whatever. Pretty active site. And then support for partners is something I came across that's support for loved ones. Like, how do I support this person? My boyfriend doesn't want to make out with me. How do I, hold space for him? So some great resources there. Feel free to reach out to me. There's my contact info, my cards were over there. Maybe I'll move them over here so they don't get lost in the CEUs. Always happy to chat. My cards do still say LPCA. I haven't gotten new ones, but what are you going to do? And, all right, what are you taking away from today? Give me at least a few things. Give it some thought. Let me know. What are you walking away with?
I'm going out of town for about 3 weeks, and I was going to this is supposed to be my last day of working, but I feel really empowered and motivated by a lot of this, and there's some clients that I know would benefit from it, so I may try to get another session in with them before I leave, just to make sure I know their view. So this is
Awesome. Really cool. Thanks for your dedication to your clients. Yep. What else? What are you walking away with?
I just appreciate the exercises, having some really concrete tools to use, because I also work for a DB and SV agency, and
Okay.
so I might only see a client one time,
Oh, wow.
and then they may go back to their abuser. So it's really helpful for me to have some really concrete things I can have in my pocket and say, look, you could do this on your own. You know, just if you feel yourself getting overwhelmed or whatever, just it's a way to calm yourself and regulate yourself a little bit.
Great. Great. Thanks. Yeah. Pretzel. It's my number one go-to. Yep.
So for some of the exercises, I always find teaching my colleagues the skills instead of just telling them how to do the skills will help influence them sharing the wealth. And I have a department meeting on Monday, and so the icebreaker will be some of these exercises.
Great. Awesome. Thanks. Yep. I do come to organizations, etc., and teach these skills, groups of therapists or other staff. I've got a slightly different one that's a lot more stats and statistics and facts and things. Guy, did you have your hand up back there?
Well, I've been in the field like 35 years, and I took 4 pages of notes. So that says something, because I've done a million trainings that I just sit there and go, and one, just to get through it for the CUs. But,
Awesome. Thanks, Guy. Kriya, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, because as somebody working in a school, I think that the elementary folks have a lot of denial that this is that there's a need to talk about this and to do preventative or look for signs of trauma in kids because they just don't want to believe it's happening. And so just the statistical pieces in of themselves are, I'm going to go just write an email, and I focus for break that just says, hey, and this is why we have to really aggressively find programming, in the school.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Every year. Yeah.
I think the piece about the traumatic reactions long term and how they can be confused for other diagnoses is really helpful because I see certain people at my company just misdiagnosing all over the place, and it's really, really frustrating because clients aren't getting the help on their trauma stuff, which is what they need.
Yep. Yeah, it's my bias, but trauma. See everything through that lens. Yeah, Guy?
see that people come in with bipolar or whatever diagnosis or bunches of diagnoses, and they talk about 50 traumas.
Yep. Something else at play. I see a hand over here. Yeah.
I think I work with a lot of trans clients, but also I think the biggest thing for me is I have a client that's really trying to go through and trying to press charges against his stepdad. And he's really battling with that whole feeling of, was it my fault? Or that kind of thing. So this is really an eye-opener, and we'll share information with him.
Great. Awesome. Thank you.
I'm really excited about that.
Right on. All right. Last chance to tell me bad stuff about the workshop. Just kidding. Tell me in private. All right, so I want to invite you to take your hands and just sweep your body and take off any shit that built up and just throw it here. Just throw it in the trash can. Leave it here. Yep. Everybody got it? All right.